I'm your host, and today my guest is James Hanisch. He's the Managing Director at Asia Pacific Hawkins Dynamic, and our key topic for today's chat is discussing around the most effective methods to monitor load in team sport athletes. So for any sports scientists, S&Cs, high performance managers, make sure to get the notepad out. If you're tuning in live on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, feel free to send through some questions, as I'm sure we'll find some time a little bit later on the show. But welcome, James. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Really looking forward to our chat.
Thank you. Yep, I've been a fan of the podcast for a while now. I'm watching it live a few times, so it's great to be on.
Oh, fantastic! It's good to know we've got a couple of listeners, mate. But for those that aren't aware of your background, do you mind providing, sort of how you started the industry, your passion for it, and work experience you've done along the way?
Sure. Yeah. Always been really interested in sport, just in general. Growing up, played a bunch of different sports, as we all do, and then realised early on that I didn't have the elite capabilities. Quite a slow twitch muscle fiber kind of guy. So just really kind of went for applied science degree in human movement, UniSA, and completed that. And then I was lucky enough to get an internship with Port Adelaide, and kind of did 6 months there. And during that period, ended up actually doing a student exchange program in the US, over to Colorado State. So if there's anyone like from a university standpoint, or students that are thinking about doing a student exchange, I highly recommend it. Not just for enjoying the time there, but then also just for like learning a different culture. And that's probably where I started to kind of fall in love with like the American side of things, American sport. And then from there, once I ended up getting back, ended up getting lucky enough to get my foot in the door with the Crows, with Stephen Schwert, who was head fitness coach then. He's now at Saka. I guess my first day on the job was, or really my interview was going out the back and kicking a ball with Andrew McLeod. So I kind of had my first taste of elite sport was getting asked whether my kick was okay, and then going outside and doing some rehab with someone I'd idolized growing up, and that's kind of when I kind of got the bug for elite sport and wanting to grind and kind of go through. So ended up volunteering for a couple of years at the Crows, and then end up in a full-time job there. We can talk about that in more detail later, I guess. And then went to Brisbane Lions for a couple of years. Kind of morphing into more of the sports science role. Started the Crows when kind of GPS had just come out, and we had the old yellow brick GP sports units that were the size of a Nokia. What was it? 9110. I can't remember what it was anymore. And then obviously now it's changed a lot, but and then there I was at Brisbane. Got a call from University of Oregon in the US and asked whether I'd be interested in heading over there. And then the answer was yes. So head over to Oregon. We're there for a couple of years, and just so as it is with sport, the head coach there went to the NFL. A couple of years later, he called, and so then went over to the Philadelphia Eagles. And then the same time I worked there, I finished my master's degree in high performance sport as well, ACU. And I was there for 7 years. And then now, really fortunate to work for Hawkins Dynamics, force plate performance company, which was originally, it is out of the US, out of Maine, but we started a whole subsidiary here in Australia, and I help manage and run Asia Pacific from our section here. So had an awesome career, particularly in elite sport, and really enjoying this next phase as well. I've got 3 kids, so making a move away from kind of the daily grind and minutiae of sport, and now having some more fun with how to apply that with a whole breadth of different customers and regions, from private to sport to university, has really been a big blessing as well. So that's a really short nutshell of a career, but there's a little taster, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it provides good context for our chat. Going back to those thick GPS units, the industry has grown a lot in terms of sports science technology, and AFL was probably leading the way in terms of GPS. But now with the ease of use of ForceDecks, the force plates data, there's been lots of inroads in that space. Is it something that you saw early on? Like you mentioned, the passion for working over in the States, it's something you recognised early on in your career, but what about from the technology point of view, or did that passion sort of grow as the industry sort of grew and developed?
Yeah, sure. I think when I had first started, biomechanics was certainly something that you needed to focus on, right? Like, you needed a master's degree in biomechanical research or engineering degree to even kind of run the system, let alone kind of deduce information from it. So it was really when I got into Philly and we started looking at that side of things in more detail. Kind of like Dari had come out, which was kind of that markerless system. We looked at Simi, which was a markerless system, but had a marker aspect to it as well, and researching Vicon and all those other things. It was a time when it was a big need for us in terms of like, how do we measure performance and apply that to the field? So from the weight room onto the field, and particularly with NFL athletes, or if you're here in Australia, rugby athletes. Understanding like the power component and the changes in that, and then I guess my passion really aligned in the end with like player development. So understanding that first, second year player or athlete, and then like, how do we progress them as quickly as possible? And I think we see that a lot in AFL now, where almost the first year players, especially the first round picks, need to actually play that first year, and that there's that similar application in the NFL as well. Like, you're paying. If you're the first or second pick, you might be doing a signing bonus of $20 million, right, on the draft day. Like, they need to play that year, so I need to play at a high level. So how do we get them there as quickly as possible? And what are the markers that we want to look for when kind of producing that to when comparison to the veterans in that group, or the job that's required for them as well. So I think as my years went on, that probably love for the performance and force output metrics superseded that of like your running loading metrics, but you can combine them together as well and get a pretty good holistic look at how do we join the weight room and the field together, and have some synergy between the two, and communicating that across from both like coaching, like strength coaching staff, but then also pushing that across to the coaching staff on the field as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. In terms of the first and second year players, like, do you think working closely with the coaches and identifying of those high draft picks and your team dynamics, who's more than likely going to be a significant player in the team for the season upcoming, over preparing them in pre-season, should that influence their load compared to on field to gym? Whereas someone that might be 4 years away and more in that athlete development sort of maturation, taking them through the fundamentals approach, or should their skill and talent level not influence, I guess, their physical development? How do you sort of balance that?
I think that's a great question. My brain goes to what's the goal, and I guess the way that I kind of think about things is more in that methodical approach about every single. You want to say that every athlete is the same, right? You treat them the same, but the reality is that if you're in the NFL, like QB1, like the first string quarterback who's playing is one of the most important people that you need to care for. But you also have to realize that injuries happen; they're part of the game, and that any of those lower tier people will need to step up during that time. I think we found that out in our 2017 season leading up to the Super Bowl. Was we had a bunch of injuries come out that were just random, random occurrences, ACLs and navicular fractures and stuff that you can't really predict or prepare for. And it's really the next man up mentality. And if you treat your play development process like that, then I think you can create a great process and method to developing people as quickly as possible as well. So I've kind of roundabout answered that, but I guess I'd probably treat everyone the same, because you never know what's going to come down the pipeline, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So prioritize. So make sure that everyone's ready, because you never know when you need to rely on them to play, rather than thinking too far ahead.
And I think you can do that with a couple of strategies, and that's having a different program and almost like a testing. One thing that I really like to do is we all talk about the periodization of training, right? Like whether it's a weight room or on the field, how we combine those two together and get a program that is hopefully building in preparation for a season or a process. I like to do that in terms of kind of our sports science periodization. So how do we periodize our testing and monitoring process within that? So whenever myself or strength staff or whoever, the coach, write down the periodization program in terms of our training, would also do that in terms of our testing process. So the first and second year players would write a testing and monitoring program that was different to our veterans and that was different to our kind of core age groups as well. So there's definitely like a different process about that. So like instead of maybe you're doing let's say doing a mid-thigh pull on the force plates once every 3 months for your veteran players, maybe you're doing that once every 2 weeks or once every week for your for your development players, because you want to really get a gauge about continued improvement. So once those other players have hit their plateau, you don't really need to see that level of data in that specific example as frequently. But maybe for the veterans, it's like the fatigue markers are more important. So let's do HRV or something else with the veterans, but you don't need to do that for your for your first year players so much because they're getting recovery on the weekend because they're not playing. If that makes sense. So that's one part for me that I really like, and that actually came about. I think this is going to sound a little silly, but I kind of like learning from very random areas. And one, for some reason, I watched the September issue, which is like Vogue documentary of the magazine, and it kind of hit home to me like. When they're doing editorial, they have a whole bunch of different pages and articles and photos and they're basically matching those all together on the wall. And so I like kind of use that same process. I throw up what are important for all the different areas that we have, and then basically wall map all those different areas together to create that kind of synergy between the sports science testing, monitoring, performance outcomes. For what we want to see and what we plan for, and then also what we plan and our actuals for our periodization on the field and in the weight room as well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's not something you hear about all the time, periodizing the testing, obviously periodizing training, both on the field and the gym, but it makes a lot of sense to periodize testing as well and have a different approach depending on the demographic. Going back to your career, mate, highlights that you're sort of proud of and that you've experienced over your career?
Yeah, sure. I mean, already kind of talked about it, but yeah, highlight number one was certainly kicking the ball with Andrew McLeod on that first day. I think that was something that really ignited passion and like the idea that this could actually be a career. And so I look back on that really fondly, especially just how it happened. I was in the office and Stephen Schwert is like, "Oh, how's your leg?" And I was like, "Oh, it's okay." I wouldn't say it's great. He's like, "I'll go test for you," and then roll at the back and have fun. I think I only missed one kick, so it was a good day. But awesome. Yeah, definitely that was a definite highlight. First game and moment in Oregon, seeing the kind of college football craziness, and when the building was first, like the football complex in Oregon was first built, kind of moving into my office there, it was pretty surreal. It's a pretty interesting place. I was lucky enough to go on Phil Knight, who's the owner of Nike, go on his private jet and travel around and look at sports science equipment and facilities and stuff like that. So that's definitely a highlight of my career, for sure. But also within that was the conversation with the staff and kind of the bonding side of things. We had a really tight-knit group at Oregon and have so much respect for those guys. And yeah, we just had an absolute blast because we were all kind of learning together. It was the first time that there had been really any sports science in kind of college sport. So it was great to kind of learn and bounce different ideas about, you've got 130 athletes in the football team. And so how do you manage that all together, especially from like a load monitoring standpoint? So kind of learning the nuances of the game and the culture and all those things. And then, yeah, I mean, at the Eagles, like, can't go past the Super Bowl, obviously. Like winning that was incredible. The ceremony at the end and the ring ceremony was ridiculous. And two things with that would be, I was so lucky that my family were over, like my brother and sister-in-law were there for the game before, ended up staying for the Super Bowl game, and came over to Minnesota, and we traveled with them. And so it was amazing to share that with, people that had helped us so much over time. But honestly, my favorite part probably of all was the week before that. We played at home in the championship game, and it was more the fact that my wife was able to run onto the field, and all our partners were able to run onto the field after the game, and we all celebrated like we're going to the Super Bowl, and it's ridiculous. And that was honestly probably my favorite part was, everyone running on the field together and like have some huge celebration. And it's so much about the process. I think anyone that, I know I've had a few people on that have, won premierships before or, championships. But it's really like the people that you're around and the support network. Like elite sports, certainly not for everyone. You do a lot of grinding, a lot of hours. So you need a big network. So being able to celebrate with like all the partners and stuff on that day was certainly a massive highlight.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Some massive experiences there that anyone would be lucky to have just a couple of those, let alone range.
Certainly been very, very fortunate, and enjoyed it. And I think honestly, I think the biggest part for me has been just really enjoying like meeting new people and being a part of some different cultures. And winning and losing aside, it's more about like the people that you're around and enjoying with the family and all those kind of things. That's the stuff that's important to me. And we've had some fantastic experiences along that, just professionally and personally as well. So super fortunate.
Yeah, fantastic and well deserved. What about on the flip side, mate? Obviously, in elite sport comes high pressure. What have been some of your biggest challenges over your career, and what did you sort of learn from it, or how did you grow from a professional point of view?
Sure. Yeah, I think as you kind of go into like further in your career, there's more on the line, right? The more senior you get, the kind of the buck stops with you more than anything else. So kind of learning those hard conversations and being able to do that in a very quickly and being quick-witted about your response, and really being armed all the time with what you need. But I think one of my earliest and best, it's like the worst and best memory for me was at the Crows. I think it really shaped my career actually, and kind of my thought process around data management and then the application to coaching staff. So Stephen Schwer invited me to his office or called me in the office one day, and Neil Craig was the head coach then, and he has certainly had a huge impact on me professionally as well. But Neil, he shut the door, which is never good when you're in like your first year, and he just said bluntly, like, who's reading your reports? And I was like, well, I think, Schwerty's reading them, and I think you're reading them. He's like, yeah, I read some of them. What about the other coaches? And, I don't know. I haven't had a discussion with them, and then from there he was, he basically goes, no one's reading them. You're failing as a sports scientist. Like there's really no reason for you to be here. Like we need you to lift, basically. And it's pretty much word for word. And so, went out of the office. I was pretty rattled. It's young kid, like 22, 23, first job in sport, and I feel like I could have really gone into the tank on that and basically just gone, stuff this, I'm out. But I came back the next morning and really just lit the fire and okay, what can I do? How do I make this better? And it really shaped all those different angles of like where can I pull information from, like what can I watch to kind of gain information, and the way I sell this, and how do I get buy-in for this metric or this process. So I think that it really shaped me in terms of the direction. And I use that example a lot when people ask me about kind of advice for elite sport, and a lot of it is about like it's going to be really hard at times. You have like tough conversations, but you really just need to flush it and move on. Or and I was lucky enough to Kobe Bryant spoke to our team before he passed away, and in Philly, and one of his things was basically just, you flush the toilet when you go to the toilet. Do the same thing with negative feedback or negative things that happen. So basically, flush it, move on, and I feel like I learned that at an early phase, and that's something that I always tell to people is like there's going to be some things and roadblocks, but it's like how you attack that next process of your life as well. So that was definitely a big challenge for me from the get-go, but it kind of propelled my my mindset moving forward.
So there's it's I guess when you process it with that sort of that mindset, there can come a lot of good, I guess, in those hard conversations, and then like you mentioned later on. When you get in a more senior position, you're having to then navigate and probably conduct, I imagine, those conversations yourself. Is that something that you obviously have? Everyone has their own different leadership style. That wouldn't have to necessarily be as blunt as probably a Neil Craig approach, but in your own way, do you feel like for a developing staff member, do you intentionally do that from time to time when they're in their sort of developing stage to, I guess, build some urgency within the staff? Or do you feel like a different approach?
I would say I probably use a different approach to that. I certainly don't shy away from the hard conversation, but I try and pick up on those things earlier. So it's like here's what attention to detail looks like for me. This report, this border is out of line, or this color is wrong, or these are things that need to change in this report to make this acceptable. And we have high standards, and this is the standard. You're not meeting the standard, so let's get this to standard and then move on. And it's similar with comments and stuff like that. Like if you're writing a comment and you're trying to deduce information out of something, let's think critically about that. If you're an exercise or sports scientist, you need to be thinking analytically about what process you is, but more importantly, how like your application. Very rarely, unless you're in the research setting, very rarely are we looking for like research answers. We're actually looking for practical answers to problems. So yes, I want to hear maybe the research side of things, but I want to hear the practical application. I love that you're going to all this effort, but if I can't do anything with it, then what's the point? And I think we've got a talk on data application and sports science in a minute anyway. But that's kind of my philosophy with that is like how do we make things practical? I don't even care if it's simple. Simple's sometimes really really good because you can action it and apply it and elicit change and talk about it. So I guess that's my leadership style is more in the continued improvement and continual check-in than it is like, all right, we're going to leave you for 6 months and then see where you come and then whack you and then I'll leave you 6 months and then whack you. Yeah. More in the just continual progression of improvement over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's great insight. Before we move into the topic, you've mentioned a few influences, Stephen Sher and Neil Craig. Have there been any other mentors, if you like, along your journey that have helped shape your philosophy?
Sure. Burjo, I interned for him very early on. Darren Burgess, for those who don't know, he's everywhere. He always been someone I could reach out to and really set for me the bar of getting back to people and kind of broadening your network of, if anyone asked me for advice on working overseas or whatever, I always say yes. And he was always very gracious to me in terms of his feedback and help and all those kind of things. And then in terms of influences, Stephen Schwert in general, like he helped me start my career and, put a lot of trust in me and we had a lot of fun as well. So I couldn't thank him enough as well. And then, honestly, my parents, I think they've had a huge influence on who I am. My dad started his own business and had taken a lot of risks as well. And I think that educating risk is really important when you're working with athletes, but then also in your life in terms of where you go. Like I wouldn't have moved over to Oregon and gone to Philly if it wasn't for their influence on me. So my parents for sure as well. And then I guess I find it really hard. Sometimes I feel like people have like these mentors and they're very they have like a list of people that they've always reached out to and always, they can go back to the list all the time. I'm not really that person. I actually really enjoy learning from almost everyone. I feel like every conversation I had with someone in the profession, I've almost used that at some point as well, to either validate something I'm doing or to change my perspective. I've tried to really have a growth mindset across the time, and certainly as I've gotten older, the growth mindset has improved. I feel like I was quite closed early on, and some of those challenges were moving to America early. I think I had a very much like Australia does everything right, rather than like, American teams win without Australia. It's about like, okay, well, there's some things that I can apply here that are going to work really well, I think. But this culture and how this happens is actually pretty cool. I like how they do that. So, one of the things I noticed coming back to Australia was in the weight room, like AFL, like thinking back, like AFL teams, their lifting psychology isn't as aggressive it is in the US. Like the US, like, the day after the game, we'd fly back from, say, Dallas at 6 a.m. in the morning, and because a bunch of the team didn't play, and they're also, getting off a tangent a little bit here, but say AFL, right? Like the percentage of load for the game is, let's say it's 60 or 70% of the week is the game, and 30% of the week is training. Well, in the US, it's flipped. So training is 70% of the week, and 30% is the game. So from a loading standpoint, the guys can actually lift really heavy at the start of the week, or post game, because they haven't actually done that much load in comparison to what they're used to from a training standpoint. So, we would lift basically at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning on a Monday morning, the day after a game, and so it's just a difference in culture. So normally your head goes as someone who's worked at AFL, you're like, man, that is crazy. You should be down at the pool doing recovery and blah, blah, blah. But, when you're in that culture and it's different, and you're looking at different methodology, and the guys need to lift heavy because they need to maintain like raw strength and power, it's a different mentality. So I think some of those things have been really interesting for me in terms of like the different cultures and how it works out, and then the influences on me individually. I've loved taking snippets from everyone that I've talked to. So I'm not that like list of person guy. I'm more of the I've learnt from so many people across my time as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that I haven't seen that, but I imagine they really embrace that session as well from a lifting point of view, and there's real intent with that session where you think straight off the bat.
Absolutely, yeah. There's juice. Yeah. Absolutely, there's juice going everywhere. So that's something I've noticed is different. Is the energy and the intent is a great word of those sessions. Is speakers are up loud. It's everyone's fired up. It's the mentality is a little different, and that's just a cultural difference, right? Like it'd be really hard to change that in Australia, and to get like a real lifting culture. Also because it hasn't been there. Like if you're in the US, you got high school games that have 30,000 people go to them in Texas, and they lift heavy, and they have like strength coaches at a high school level. And then, college is obviously college sport as well. You got strength coaches who are making 500, 600, 700,000 a year. And then you got NFL. So like the progression of the weight training and the focus on it is kind of impacted at an early age. So, if you're someone in Australia who's coming to AFL, the chances are you haven't really been in the gym properly until you're 18. So, and you get into the AFL system. So, by the time you get into the college or into the NFL system, these guys are, they're doing Olympic lifts at a very high level, and which you need a lot of energy and external cues from, rather than just being intrinsically focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, better dive into the key topics. So, in terms of effective load monitoring, I guess, do you want to sort of open up in what does load monitoring mean to yourself? I guess from a perspective of, let's say, a sports scientist going into a new sport at a new club, what are some sort of key fundamentals to understand to put good practices in place? Do you think?
Sure, yeah, and I can talk on this in like a holistic sense, but I can also go down and drill down to the 1 foot view if you want as well. I guess, sure. Yeah, for me, I was really fortunate when I first got to the Eagles. I the owner there is really big on if, all the owners of NFL teams billionaires, right? So that money's not really a thing. And it's, if they have like a certain thing that they like and kind of sports science and being really progressive in approaches was something that the owner of the Eagles was really passionate about. So, we had a bunch of different methodologies and went from HRV every day, specific gravity testing every day, weigh in every day, nutrition stuff every day, questionnaires, force plates, GPS. We had a kind of visual acuity board, that looked at reaction time and knowledge base every day. So we had a great, very robust kind of testing battery down pack. So we had thousands of data points weekly, tens of thousands weekly that we were monitoring and being really experimentative with. The problem with that, and what we learned, was we spent so much time in our computers that we lacked the kind of one-on-one conversation with the athletes and really getting to know on a personal level where athletes were and players were and what their changes were about and like the meaning and the reason why. If you go to like Simon Sinek with his like reason why. So the next year we kind of pair that back and we go, all right, what is important? And if we have 1,000 data points that get us to a decision, what do 10 data points do to get us to 99.9% of that decision? And I bet you we can get there. And that's really where I guess I learned a lot, was how do we be complex with simple? And I guess that's now my philosophy, is more around that side of things. So an example I use with that is, let's just take distance covered, right? So if I use the American way, I say yards or meters, just distance covered, right? So how far did you go in a session? And we can obviously periodize that out into a program. We can look at, a step periodization plan or a tactical periodization plan, whatever you want to use, right? You can look at distance covered as a way to do that. So you have what you planned, and I would just highlight that, a big philosophy of mine is being really good at planning, and planning not just to create like a robust athlete. I kind of don't like the term robust. I feel like robust it is a word that means that they're not going to be very agile when they need to be, or adaptable to change. And you obviously don't want a fragile athlete either. There's a book called Antifragile by, or is it Hassim Talib, I think it is. Don't quote me on that. We'll look it up later. That kind of, it's a different methodology, that book, in the application, but if you apply it to sports science, the way I look at it is that you really want to create an athlete that's anti-fragile, meaning not robust where they can't adapt, and not fragile. They want to be someone that is adaptable to change. Often the toughest athletes to program for are the fringe athletes. So if you take AFL, one of the players who's an emergency, maybe they played 10 minutes of a game and need to be prepared to play 10 minutes. Maybe that week they play 60 minutes because someone got injured in the first minute, or maybe they don't play at all. And then the next week they might play a full game, or they might play none. And so that there's those players are really hard. And the NFL, I would use the example of, you have 46 players who suit up for the game. You have a 53-man roster. So there's 9 players who are missing out. 7 players who are missing out each week. Those 7 players, if they go in, they're going to play special teams, which is basically running as fast as you can multiple times in a game. And then the next week they might be out, and so they don't play. And they might have 2 weeks out, and then they come in and run as fast as they can for that week. So you can't overload them during the week just in case they play. And then you can't, there's reasons why you can't train them like just after the game because the field's shut and there's like logistical issues. So they're the fringe players that you want to be like adaptable and that can be malleable week to week, that you can change. So that's kind of a rationale and context to kind of what I'm talking about now. But yeah, so you have your planned, then you can have your actual. So what I would do is I'd try and be complex with, say, distance covered. So planned versus actual. Okay, what was the actual against their planned? in most sport, there's positions. So if we're looking at forwards for AFL or rugby or whatever it might be, or soccer, in NFL you have lots of different positions. So say tight ends, you might have 4 tight ends on your team. If one of those tight ends is out, you've gone from the distribution of load as 25% each to 33%. So you've increased by a good number of percentage just for that one practice or 1 week. So I look at the kind of plan for distribution versus the actual distribution. Look at, there's, acute chronic has had its time in the limelight and has been plus or minus, wherever everyone sits on that. But, I think it's a great measure to look at, where's this week versus the last 4 weeks. It gives you like an idea about where things are at. Same with monotony and strain. So that's like a 7-day, where are things at within 7 days or within 1 week. Look at MBI. So it's another statistical method that people slam as well, or they're on the train. But let's look at that as well. Like my philosophy is not so much there's a golden nugget for how we decide things. End of the day, like we talk about the art of coaching, it's also the art of like sports science. So if you look at these numbers every day and you've got those 10,000 hours, there's a pretty good chance that you know what you're talking about, and you have the art of sports science in you and your decision making. And so I'd line all these different ones up. I'd have it's all marked out in terms of increase, decrease, stable, or where things are at, and then make a determination about, okay, I feel good about this person, I feel good about the plan. Let's keep the plan for tomorrow or for next week, or whatever we're doing. And then maybe someone has a couple changes that you're not quite sure on. Okay, now we're distance covered, I'm not quite sure on that. So my next step process in my flow chart is to go to fatigue monitoring with force plates. So where's my, using Hawken, let's have a look at the, modified RSI. Where are they at for our testing yesterday? Their RSI was great. Okay, I'm not overly concerned. That's my next step, my next tier down. They can keep planned for the next day. And so to me, it's about kind of being complex with just one number, and that's distance covered. So I've gone through like a 7-stage process of identifying whether I feel comfortable or uncomfortable with that person's process, and then move on to the next person or the next metric. So instead of having 1,000 metrics, maybe I've got 10 that I view as really important in my process tree, and then and go from there. So I hope that makes sense. I feel like it's about setting a framework where you're being more complex with the simple things, and then having like a decision tree about how you go about making changes. So, and that's just for the sports scientists, right? And so now that we've deduced all that information, how do I elicit change and communicate and provide that stuff? So yeah, really fortunate in Philly that the IT guys were phenomenal. They actually broke down all the film into black and white, and we're able to get, we're lucky enough to use like Zebra, which was or Zebra in Australia, I think that's right, which is RFID, had a chip in the ball as well. And so for every team play during practice, so NFL is scripted really well. Whenever they snap the ball, you would get, basically that's the start of a play, and then when the whistle blew off, they were able to get the whistle off the film and stop the play. So I knew what their distance covered and speeds and all that kind of stuff was for a play during practice, and then I could apply that for every single person, and then basically say, okay, if we're scripting out practice tomorrow and the coaches script out practice at night time for the next day, I'm talking a lot here, but this will make sense. Then I can say, okay, well, I want this person to be 5% less. Like that means nothing to a coach. What does mean something is, well, instead of their normal, which is like what they're scripted for, which is 24 plays tomorrow, I want them scripted for 22. And so let's change them to 22 plays, or let's change it to 15. And so now, instead of scripting them in those 25 plays, they're scripting in 22, and we get the load that we want. So our planning is really, really good. And our the way that we're talking to coaches and pushing information stems back from Neil Craig, right? Like how do we talk to coaches in a language that makes sense for all of us? And that means that picking metrics that I understand and that I can interpret, and then I can do complex with simple, but then also how do I deliver that in a way that's meaningful as well, to make decisions. So very long-winded, but that's kind of how my process works, from a sports science load monitoring standpoint.
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. It's a great insight in terms of, like you mentioned, integrating and I guess collaborating with other staff. Is that where the distance covered is quite a useful one? Because I guess it's the coaches can understand it, the athletes can understand it. No matter what the drill is, you're gonna accrue distance. Whereas maybe your higher speed metrics or transfer to some drills, or take us through your thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, distance covered's important. Don't get me wrong, but we looked at other metrics too, right? So like you look at high speed running, you look at your, are you hitting max speed? All those things, acceleration, deceleration. So in terms of on field stuff, that's certainly there. As something that's important, because it also has to do with number of snaps you play and all those kind of things that, from a coaching standpoint, that's one in the NFL particularly is, you get the list of how many snaps people played after the game, and that's something that's pretty common. So, that's a great metric to use. It's more of just an example about the process. I would do the same thing for high speed yardage, and I do the same thing for acceleration, decelerations, or whatever as well. So, it's more just identifying the process that I kind of go through. Is like, if we take, you could take, modified RSI from the force plates too. So we test every single Monday post game. Be consistent about our processes there and methodologies. Then I can go to the same level. Okay, let's look at the last 5 weeks. What did that look like? What's the percentage difference from last week? Has it gone up or down? What's the trend when compared this week to the last 5 weeks? What's the what does that like MBI tell us? Is it stable, increase, decrease? How many standard deviations is it different? What's our measurement against a fatigue state or our lower state? So I'm just really stacking like different types of cues to understand this one number, and then I can make a decision on that for what's important next, to make a change or to not make a change, or to communicate. Sometimes the best communication is, I've done all this work that looks like is complex and doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but then the thing that I would do is I would have an email and I'd go 3 dot points, bang, 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 send. So I feel like sometimes, and maybe it's not the case so much now, but as I was coming through over the last like 10 years or whatever, sports science, it was almost like, how do you justify the value, right? How do you justify the value of using the sports tech? It's expensive. Some of the stuff is look at your tracking information. Some of it's pretty expensive. You try to justify that to a team. I want to spend $50,000 or $100,000. What do we get out of that? There's a lot of justification as to why. Even like a position, like you're working for what, 30, 40, 50 grand. How do you justify that salary? And what I really learned in the end, it's actually not justifying it. It's, you can justify that by being really simple with how you deliver it. So, hey, these are the 3 things that I think are important for tomorrow. Bang, bang, bang. And then all the work you've done is really easy, and people know that you know what you're talking about because you're being really simple in the end. So I guess that's kind of my process to kind of round it up is, or to round it off is, you do all this work, and it's time consuming, as data management, cleaning information, all that kind of stuff. And then delivering that in a very short, sharp, concise way is really important.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think touching on the fact of how important it is to, I guess, add value to the program and make an impact through delivering a message in a language that the other person's going to understand. You mentioned a couple of, so MBI and then gravity testing, 2 terms I haven't heard of before.
Urine specific gravity, like USG, P testing. For hydration. Yeah. Right. And then modified RSI, reactive strength index. It's just a measure of, you can measure it as a neuromuscular fatigue. So for us, we would basically look at has that changed from, or what has the change been from the week or from the game, and then is the person fatigued or not, and then how do we manipulate that for their session? So one thing that we used Hawken at Philly, and one thing I love about the system, is there's a traffic light system. So basically, if they're 2 standard deviations down, it goes red, and you can say, okay, all right, hey, let's do another test now again, and they go again. Yep, it's red. All right, great. Let's go over to the medical team, have a quick chat about what the progression is, or to the strength coach. Hey, let's do some extra warm-up prep with this person, and then we'll retest again. Or they might say, yeah, I'm feeling really sore from the game. And maybe that's a recovery session rather than doing a lifting session. So in order to, that's one thing that I would say as well is like finding technology that, helps speed up that decision-making process is really important. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, from force plate standpoint, Hawkins certainly did that for me. It was really like, great, I can just traffic light system, and if it's red, then I can like make a decision quickly. That's great, and then we can move on. I don't have to go back and do all the data management, all that kind of stuff. I can just make a decision on the fly and go. So yeah, that's a really valuable piece. As you start kind of joining all these different techs together, you need things that are kind of helping facilitate change quickly as well.
And you mentioned at the start sort of applying a lot of sport science and having plenty of data that you're assessing the athletes with, both on their fatigue levels as well as wellness, and progressing and how they're developing as well. When you filtered down, what were some of the things that you started to cull out from the program in year 2?
Yeah, I think for me it was really about athlete footprint. So the 2 things were, what we just touched on them was like being able to make decisions quickly with information. And then the second thing was, and with that, quickly doesn't mean that you're losing the quality. Quickly means that you can just make a decision fast. So, if we take Hawkins, for example, like very accurate and reliable. And then the information that comes out of that, is going to be that. So you can make a decision with accurate, reliable information. So that's a tick. And then the second thing was athlete footprint. So how do we get metrics without having an impact on the athletes? And how do we do that in a way that isn't impacting their day-to-day movements? Or if it is, how do we get it in a process that they're already walking through the building in a certain way and kind of making sure that we get it. So one of the things we did, instead of trying to have them go to an area to do a questionnaire, and you obviously toy with, I think Australian football athletes are probably different to kind of American athletes who aren't used to that. But instead of having it on their phones and trying to do it on their phone, we had it set up at the nutrition bar, which I had to walk past to get to the locker room every day. So there's no real add to the process in terms of where they're going. And then it was kind of, okay, we'll do a questionnaire at that point. So the things that I found really important were, force plate, because I feel like you can really, you can apply that to like your player development. You can apply that to fatigue. You can apply it to kind of performance, output and change, and also apply it to like what you want to do from a programming standpoint. Is what you're training working, and apply that to the field. Then from a tracking standpoint on the field, I want to know basically how many reps you're doing and what your intensity is of those reps. So having that information is really valuable. And then wellness information. So really just hitting those 3 big nuggets about what are you doing in the weight room, how do we apply it, what are you doing on the field, and then how are you? And how have you responded to that stuff. So, the HRV, while really, really good for me from like a understanding standpoint, was, getting 90 players to lay down for 3 minutes when they arrived at the facility was tough. And then, you have different devices now. Like the Aura Ring is amazing in terms of sleep information and in terms of heart rate variability. But, having someone wear that every night and being diligent on that, try not to rely on the athletes to do something, trying to do things that don't get in the way of them, if that makes sense.
For sure. And from a challenge point of view for a sports science, you mentioned early on learning how important it is to communicate and build reports that coaches are going to read. What are some other challenges that you've faced along the way, and some practical tips for, I guess, practitioners to have some awareness around?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just hit the reporting side of things, I think having reporting that, 1-page report right? Everyone should be doing one-page reports. Keep it really simple, doing dot points, things that are simple to read and understand, but then also setting out reports in a way that has a flow and kind of a process of reading and being able to download the information. So maybe it starts with like the team information at the top, and then it goes down into the positional information and then individual information. So like how does your report flow and go? And then if you're doing graphs, make the graphs apply to what the data is saying as well. So if you're looking at a volume metric, let's use a bar graph. So that's basically like a cup filling up. It's a volumetric bar graph. Look at intensity. Let's look at a line graph. Kind of gives a little more difference between volume and intensity, so you can change it. If you're doing comparisons between two things, like a radar plot's really good, or having a bar graphs together. Like I think as you kind of go into information and then kind of showing that practically, being able to manipulate your graphs and show them or tables and show it in a way that is really simple, but then also makes sense. Making sure borders are done properly, or titles are in interesting positions, or out of the way. There's little tricks and tips that you can do that make something more readable. And it doesn't mean you have to go crazy with it, but making something that looks clean and has like very solid information that's really easy to read is really important. If you're, I mark assignments as well and tutor for university, and it's the same thing. Like the assignments that you read, the ones that are laid out really well are really easy to read, and it makes it really easy to mark. And it's the same thing. If you're trying to read a report and it's confusing, your mind just goes elsewhere, and you kind of like off the side. And so I think from a reporting standpoint, it's being really careful how you report and being really attention to detail and about how you actually put things together and the way that you go about it as well. So I forgot what the question was now, but that's one example is report.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, no, just practical tips, I guess, for sports owners starting out and that want to work in pro sport, or perhaps are currently working in pro sport and looking to
Yeah.
make a bigger impact.
Time is really valuable, and not to underestimate that your time is valuable, and just like being present, right? Like if you are lucky enough to get an internship or to be around for a certain amount of time, be there longer. Like there's something about giving up your time and showing that you're dedicated that will get you a job doing that, or at least put you in good stead. Because sometimes it might not be the job at that actual place, but when someone calls them and asks, "Hey, what's James like?" and they go, "Hey, I mean, he's raw. He's learning the way in terms of football and what he's doing. But man, he was around all the time. Always helped. Always willing to ask questions. He'd take out the rubbish and the trash if he needed to. Like he was just there helping at all times. Like that is enough to get a job in this industry, especially. So that's what I would say is like if you get in somewhere and you're lucky enough to get in there, be around all the time, ask great questions. No one's going to turn you away for asking questions, but then also be willing to just go the extra mile. I certainly am a huge believer in people getting paid what they deserve. I think we're slowly progressing that as an industry, but still see too much where you need 10 years experience and people are getting paid 25 grand a year. But if for those starting positions, if you want to get into sport, yes, you're going to have to go above and beyond because there are a lot of people who want that same position. So yeah, if you are, get in there and show that your time is something that you're willing to give up and make a change and make a difference. And I've always been a huge believer in just make your boss look better. So if you're at the bottom and your boss is one tier up from you, make your boss look better. If you're like the CEO is the next person above you, like make the CEO look better. Like that's your whole job is to make the person above you look better, and that's their job to make the person above them look better. And so if you can help them be better, then you're adding you're a value add for the team or for the organization or the clinic or the practice, wherever you're at. You're an add, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's sound advice. Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of going back to applying the science, force plates, it's something that is make like GPS has made a lot of inroads in the industry and their use, and it's probably at a place now where it's a lot easier to use, like you mentioned. like Hawkins Dynamics, in terms of giving traffic feedback and the reliability now with the data and being able to access it really quickly. What are some key metrics? You mentioned, I mentioned mid-thigh pull, something that you like to look at. What are some other areas that you like to look at, whether it be from jump testing or just for general athlete development?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. It's like, what's your end goal, right? And that's kind of where I like start is like, what's the reason why? Like, why do you want to test? I think there's like a few different areas you can go. I think we've talked about, you can look at fatigue, you can look at like professional, like performance development, or athlete development, and progression over time. And then you can also look at like the player development side of things. And I'll just look at like, volume, intensity, frequency, right? Like how frequent are you testing? And then the frequency of testing is going to dictate what you look at. So from a fatigue side of things, like modified RSI is fantastic, but it also needs to be something that you're doing frequently, like once a week, twice a week, something that you can really track that quite diligently over time. I'm a big fan of, if you're looking at kind of like performance improvement over time. Actually, one of our guys at Hawken, Jason Lake, he's written this article called the ODS system, which is basically output, drivers, and strategy. So, and I love it. I think it's you really want to find out like what's the performance output of people, what are the drivers for that output, and what's the strategy they used. And if you can find out those three things, you can really understand the progression of someone and what you need to work on. So if their strategy is that they're a hip hinger rather than using legs to jump, let's work on that. And what are the coaching cues for that to work on that? If someone has an unbelievable mid-thigh pull and their peak force is through the roof, but then when it goes to looking at their propulsive force and their kettle movement jump and it's poor, okay, their peak force is great. We know they have the force there, but they can't jump with it. Okay, let's find a way to understand how we can get them to build their jumping prowess. So is that looking at extra plyometrics? Is that looking at cleans and hang cleans and snatches, whatever it might be, to kind of gain that explosive edge, because they have the force there to use. We just need to use it right. So there's lots of different avenues that you can go down. I don't want to go like too into the weeds with it either. I'll just say for anyone who is listening, like just reach out. It's something that really passionate about, and I'll share my email and whatnot after, I guess. But it's just let's have a conversation. I'm always available. I kind of it's funny, like I'm still in that elite sport mindset. So like I'm a total grinder, and I've got 3 kids, so I'm always awake. So like I love like getting back to people. I feel like if I'm not getting back to you in 5 minutes, I've been hit by a bus. So if you need to get, like, if you want something, just give me a text or email. I'll get back to you quick.
That's awesome.
But I think from that standpoint, like it's really about the reason why, and then applying different metrics from there as you roll through. So from a rehab standpoint, how do you go through that rehab standpoint and what testing? Because again, you can kind of periodize that testing, right? So, all right, let's start with like 20 squats. Okay, we've gone through the squat progressions. Okay, let's go with a land and hold bilaterally. Just dropping from a box, landing and holding, being really simple. So how do you absorb that force? Okay, you can land and hold. All right, now let's do a bilateral jump. Excellent. Next phase, let's do a unilateral jump, like single leg counter movement jump. Great. Let's do and you're stepping through the process of what can you do and what metrics can we look at. And then, then you go for a bilateral drop jump. Right, now we do a single leg drop jump. So you can kind of progress through like a rehab phase in terms of programming that way as well. And what we tend to find is when you improve in performance, your asymmetry also widens, right? So you can jump high or have greater peak power or peak force, but your asymmetry gets worse. And then you end up maintaining that force, but your asymmetry gets better. But then when you make another improvement, your asymmetry worsens again, and then you plateau, and then you get better. And so we see that progression over time. And then once we hit a certain threshold, we can say, all right, we're ready for the next testing battery. So now we'll go to unilateral canoe jump, whatever it might be. So got a little bit of the weeds there, but end of the day, I think it's more about the reason why you want to test and the goals that you're trying to achieve, and we can retrofit metrics within that that suit that population as well.
Fantastic. Where do you see load management and technology going in the next sort of 5 years for pro sport clubs?
Great question. It's funny because I think we've seen a big change in terms of the kind of accumulation of information together. So you see like the film or the video and say GPS information together, and kind of matching those to try and get information out. But what I really see is just speed. It's being able to quickly do things, but knowing that it's accurate and reliable. And that to me is like, if we can make decisions quickly using technology and the technology doesn't get in the way of your job, it actually helps you make decisions quickly and then moves on. That's one of the things I always say about kind of Hawken is like, this shouldn't take you an hour to do one person, and be really cumbersome, and you're like, man, I don't trust it's telling me the right information. You should be able to just go, we're doing this, we're moving on. And it should get out of the way of what you're doing, but give you really great insight, valuable information to make decisions, objectify your decision making, and then let's get on with the rest of the day. We've got to treat people, we've got a session to get to, all those kind of things. So to me, it's about the speed and kind of refining that decision making process, I guess, is kind of the main thing that's going to keep changing over the next 5 years.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it seems like already this year it's sort of moving towards that, in terms of, like reducing the workload rather than increasing the workload for practitioners.
Absolutely.
And speeding up the process.
Yeah, that the whole like big data coin has kind of moved on. Like I think we're all in that position now where there's plenty of data, but it's about like what's our decision-making process now within that data.
We've covered a hell of a lot of information there, so I really appreciate James in sharing not only some wisdom but also some stories and insights and practical tips for sports scientists, as well as for the athletes to get a better understanding. Anything before we start to wrap up the show that you'd like to discuss or elaborate on in terms of load management and effective strategies?
No, I feel like we've definitely covered our time. I'll just say that honestly, anyone who would like to reach out and have a chat about any of this stuff, or in the profession, or Hawken related, whatever you want to talk about, happy to have a discussion about it. So just feel free to ping me and reach out.
Fantastic. Moving into the last 3 question, mate. Any pet peeves, anything that fires you up, makes you angry from a work-life perspective?
Oh man, I honestly, I'm a try to stay between a 4 and a 7 out of 10. Stay in that range, especially with 3 kids. So nothing really makes me angry anymore. I guess just people not taking advantage of where they're at, and just not having like attention to detail is probably my biggest thing. Get after it. You got one life. Take some risks and enjoy what you're doing is probably when people kind of take a step back and they're trying to not like sure, like I'm a big just pull the trigger kind of person.
Go for it. Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
What about favorite way to spend a day off?
Oh, I mean, yeah, just with the kids traveling. I love going overseas and seeing things and seeing their reactions to life. Being a dad definitely changes your outlook on life for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And we're recording this live interview for those listening to in podcast land, October 2023. What's on the horizon for you, mate? What are you most excited about for the rest of the year?
Oh, mate, we're actually just finishing house renos at the moment. They're done in 2 weeks. So we're currently living in a 1-bedroom house with a living room. So the 3 kids are in the living room living, and we have no kitchen or dining room. We've got a camp kitchen in the porch, washing our dishes at the side of the house. So to have some running water and a dishwasher is going to be just primo. So end of the year, and then honestly just breaking bread in our house and inviting people over for dinner and enjoying people's company and having great conversations and stuff like that is really what I'm excited for, to be honest.
Yeah. Good timing to be able to get that work done now rather than stressing about December when things don't get done till the end of January.
Absolutely. crazy enough, it's ahead of schedule. So you want a good builder, I got you.
Wow, there you go. You don't hear that very often.
No, exactly.
Love that. Well, yeah, thank you again, James, for jumping on and having a chat. It's been well over an hour, and I've got 2 pages of notes, and no doubt the listeners do as well. You mentioned you're happy to follow anyone to follow up and ask some questions. Where's the best place to get in contact in terms of socials, and yeah, how do you like people to send through those questions?
Sure, yeah, LinkedIn, yeah, James Hanisch. So just reach out. Also, yeah, Instagram, James _ Hawken Dynamics is my tag there. And then my email is james@hawkendynamics.com. So yeah, please reach out. And then as long as you're not a bot, I'll give you my phone number. We can chat.
How do you test that? You've ever had any direct messages or emails? I guess they go straight to junk.
No,
Yeah.
I got no one in my DMs, mate. We just keep it nice and easy. No, no, just send me an email and we'll go from there.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, for those maybe driving, listening to podcasts, don't sweat. We'll add all those links in the show notes. So when you do park the car, you'll be able to access them pretty easily. Thanks for everyone that's tuned in live. If you tuned in halfway, make sure to go to our YouTube channel to listen to the whole recording until we publish this recording on our podcast. Our next live chat is next Friday with Matt Jordan. That's the 13th of October at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks again, James.